there was no earth, you were the earth. When there was nothing, you were everything.
Do you need something?
Can you tell me more about the Seekers?
The Seekers of Truth were born from the original Inquisition long ago, when it united with the Chantry. Seekers stood above the Templars, watching over them but also investigating magical events they couldn't handle. We were meant to be incorruptible, above reproach. How seldom does reality match the ideal?
But what are Seekers, exactly?
Those who know anything of us think we are Templars. We do not use lyrium, however. Our abilities are different, as was our original purpose. We disciplined the Templars and were accountable only to the Divine. And not even her, truthfully.
So nobody ever watched over the Seekers?
It was the Divine's duty, but she could only do so much when the truth was hidden from her. The Templars have always feared us. When a Seeker arrived at a circle, they knew trouble was afoot. That kind of power is troubling. You begin to think you are the only one who can solve the world's problems. If you don't see a problem, it doesn't exist. If someone insists it does, they are the blind ones.
Do you think that kind of problem could ever be fixed?
Possibly. Though the Seekers themselves would need to change. They were clearly not willing to, even though they abandoned everything they stood for to avoid it. In my heart, I believe they can still be salvaged, but not by their own hands.
You mentioned that Seekers have different abilities than Templars.
Entirely. A Templar's abilities come from lyrium and are designed to hunt mages. Ours come from ritual and many years of dedicated training. We cannot be possessed by demons and are immune to mind control. Useful considering our role. Seekers can gain other gifts, but that depends on the individual.
What kind of gifts do you have?
I can set the lyrium within a person's blood aflame. Both mages and Templars bend before my will. Some Seekers use it to interrogate, others simply to paralyze. Once there was a Seeker who could use it to kill. That particular gift is considered rare.
Why did your order turn against the Chantry?
We originally united with the Chantry through a treaty that stated they would keep mages under control. It was felt Most Holy had tacitly allowed the Circle of Magi to vote on its independence, thus breaking the treaty. The Seekers saw themselves as justified, and they led the Templars into a war of righteousness.
You sound like you disagree.
We knew what was happening at Kirkwall, where the Mage Rebellion began. We looked into reports of Knight Commander Meredith's harsh treatment of her charges years earlier. But we found so many shocking cases of magical corruption, it was decided her actions were justified. If we'd been there when it happened, if we'd looked harder at the root causes...
You're right. Something should have been done.
When faced with a problem, the Seekers would close ranks and crush it. We would find an answer, but only once we felt we weren't being coerced. The moment the mages voted for independence, our response was predictable. It was difficult to watch.
How does someone become a Seeker?
Most Seekers begin training in their youth. I was much older, an exception due to my noble birth. We train rigorously for years. Our bodies and minds must be elastic to undergo the vigil, and most fail even then.
Is the vigil some kind of initiation?
It is the rite every Seeker must go through in order to summon their gifts. A full year of fasting, prayer, and separation from all distractions, including other people. We empty ourselves of all emotion, focusing only on the purity of our devotion. And the moment it finally ends, it's wonderful. Faith realized. I cannot put it into words.
I wish I could experience that.
If the vigil was not so arduous, I'd say more should attempt it. What if mages never needed to fear possession by demons? I'm told it is impossible, however. I suppose I'll never know the truth of it now.
I've no more questions.
Yes?
I'd like to get to know you better.
You would?
Is that a problem?
Not entirely. I'm just curious as to your motivation.
Is there any harm in us becoming a little closer?
Plenty.
Is that right?
As you wish. My name is Cassandra Pentecost, daughter of the Royal House of Navarra, 78th in line for the Navarran throne. I joined the Seekers of Truth as a young woman, and was with the Order until they withdrew from the Chantry. I remained as the Divine's right hand, carrying out her order to form the Inquisition. And here we are. That's all there is to know, my lord.
You're a member of Navarra's royal family.
The Pentecosts are a very large clan. Half of Cumberland could say the same.
Really?
No, but it feels that way. I have hundreds of relatives so distant they need charts to prove we're related at all. And they have them. Oh yes. The Pentecosts value their precious blood like it runs with gold.
And you joined the Seekers to get away from that?
It was a life worth getting away from. The Pentecosts are famed for dragon hunting, but few actually pursue the craft. Most are fat and lazy. They pay lip service to the Maker and care only for idle pleasures and past glories. My brother was all that kept me in Navarra. Once he was gone, so was I.
Tell me about your brother.
I would prefer not to speak of Anthony. Another time, perhaps.
You don't seem to like your homeland much.
My family polluted it for me. What little I saw of my homeland was through the bars of a gilded cage. My uncle treated me like a porcelain doll to be placed on a shelf and dusted only when necessary. Thus I did not see Navarra, the real Navarra, until much later. By then I realized I knew it not at all.
Your uncle? What about your parents?
They had the misfortune of taking the wrong side in the second attempt to overthrow King Marcus. The king executed them, but spared my brother and I since we were family and children at the time. Thus we were raised by my uncle, a mortalitasi who preferred the company of his corpses to the living.
Your uncle was a mortalitasi?
A death mage. He still is. My countrymen do not burn the dead. They bury them in special crypts. The mortalitasi supervise the crypts, like priests. Uncle Vestalis oversees the grand necropolis. Navarrans spend more time honoring dead relatives than they do with living ones. It is odd to be so fascinated with death and its trappings. I will never understand it.
So you were the right hand to the Divine.
To Divine Justinia, yes. And Divine Beatrix before her, in fact. The position is normally reserved for Templars of the Knights Divine, but my circumstances were unusual.
Unusual how?
You don't know the story? Thank the Maker. I will tell you if you wish, but it isn't as exciting as some drum it up to be. The short version is that I once saved the previous Divine's life. My reward was becoming her right hand.
But what does a right hand do exactly?
What is your hand capable of? It gives, it takes. It beckons. It makes a fist. Liliana and I extended the Divine's reach beyond the Grand Cathedral. We went where she could not. After Beatrix, I was tired of the position and wanted to return to the Seekers. But Justinia convinced me to stay. Her vision for the future gave me hope.
You thought she could really change things?
Justinian knew the war was coming long before it began. She tried to avert it, but the forces arrayed against her were too strong. Sometimes you have to break a bone so it can be reset. That's where the Inquisition comes in. It was to be the answer. A means to preserve as well as an agent for change. I only wish she had lived to see it.
So what's the story about you becoming the right hand?
Sweet Andraste, do you really want to hear that? It was, what, 18, 20 years ago? Some still discuss it like it happened yesterday. The tale gets bigger each time it's told. I barely recognize myself within it now.
I'm sure you're just being modest.
I was there. I think I know what happened. To hear others tell it, I alone saved Divine Beatrix from a horde of dragons sent to assault the Grand Cathedral. Rather impressive for such a young seeker, wouldn't you say?
And the truth is?
I stumbled upon a conspiracy to kill Beatrix. A Templar Knight Commander was at its heart. And there was a dragon battle at the Grand Cathedral that I had help from loyal mages who rallied to the cause. They freed the dragons from magical control. Without them, the Divine and I would both have died. Yet I became the right hand, and they are forgotten.
What happened to the mages that helped you?
They went back to their circles, with rewards and privileges and most holy gratitude. Many of them died at the contact.
You're delightful. You know that?
No, I do not know that. I object. There is nothing delightful about me.
I beg to differ.
I think I preferred you in the stocks.
I'll let you get back to work.
Do you need something?
That's enough for now.
Another time, then.
Nice work at Redcliffe. I could help the mages learn to work with Inquisition soldiers if you like. Not that the chief has any apostates in the group.
We'll talk later.
There was no word for heaven.
Travel safely.
Or earth, or sea or sky.
At your service.
I want to hear more about you.
Compared to yours, my life will seem dull indeed.
Your name Blackwall doesn't sound Orlesian. Marcher, then? Ferelden?
I was from the Free Marchers originally. Markham. That was a long time ago. Another life.
I hear that many wardens were once criminals.
You're right. And when you join, your past is forgotten, so let's leave it that way.
What did you do before you became a warden?
I was a soldier, a nobody trained to wield a sword and follow orders. I grew weary of fighting other men's wars.
So you became a warden?
More or less. Becoming a Grey Warden was the first time I felt like I mattered. The life I led before seems hollow in comparison. Perhaps one day it will fade away.
Why did you join the Wardens?
Because they remember honor and sacrifice. Words that have little meaning to the rest of us. Because they lay down their lives for those they have sworn to protect. We all need to believe there are such men in the world. I needed to believe I could be one of them.
We can continue this discussion at another time.
Very well. Yes?
Let's talk about the Grey Wardens. You must know a lot about them.
Ah, the Wardens. I'm afraid we're less exciting than we seem.
The Blight's been over for 10 years. What do Wardens do when the world's not ending?
There is still Darkspawn. Just because we killed so many in Ferelden doesn't mean they're gone. And the world is not so peaceful that there's no use for good men with swords. Sometimes you have to figure out for yourself what the pledge to protect others really means. It's not always about just archdemons and blights.
Where were you during the Blight?
I was in Ferelden, on my own like always. Quietly killed my fair share of Darkspawn too.
You haven't had contact with other Wardens for a while. Why were you on your own?
It's what I've always done. Recruitment only requires one man. Besides, I've always been a loner. Works best for everyone that way.
So you have no idea where the rest of the Wardens are?
Do you find that odd? The Blight is over. We don't need an organized force. And orders don't change much from day to day. For the last 1,000 years or so, it's been just find Darkspawn, kill them, repeat as necessary.
Let's continue this at another time.
As you wish. I'll be here if you need me. I'm here.
Nothing right now. Perhaps in a bit.
These truths the Maker has revealed to me. As there is but one world,
What's going on?
one life, one death. There is but one God.
So how did you get the name Iron Bull?
I picked it. We don't have names under the cube. Just, I don't know. Job descriptions, I guess. When I came to Orlais, I chose the Iron Bull for myself.
But why specifically Iron Bull?
This may surprise you, but I really like hitting things. Also, it's the Iron Bull, technically. I like having an article at the front. It makes it sound like I'm not even a person, just a mindless weapon. An implement of destruction. That really works for me.
I'd like to know more about your work with the Ben Hasrath.
Ben Hasrath is actually a general term. You've got the secret police who investigate problems inside our territory. You've got the re-educators who take people with problems and fix their minds. Or make them disappear. And then you've got the spies.
How do the re-educators work?
Well, I only know the basics. Wasn't my area. That said, keep a man awake long enough. Ask the right questions, give the right potions, and you can get him to say anything. You don't need blood magic or demons to change someone's mind. We're a lot more fragile than we'd like to believe.
You can alter someone's beliefs that easily?
One of my friends was a re-educator. He said that every memory is like the page of a book. When you examine a memory, you're turning to that page, and when you're there, the page is laid bare. Write a few notes in the margins of the page, erase a word here and there, and your whole outlook changes. Always felt a little weird reading after that conversation.
The re-educators sound horrible.
Yeah, they probably do. Here's the thing, though. What happens in Orlais when you commit a crime or betray a lord? They just lop your head off. At least the Qunari try to fix you.
And you're a spy?
Close. I am now, I suppose. But that's not how I started. They sent me to Saharan because they needed someone who could fight and hunt down problems. That whole island was a sack of cats. Incursions from Tevinter, Tal Vashath, and native rebels fighting both sides. And in the middle, me, trying to wrangle the rebels and restore order.
I can't imagine that was easy.
Nope. I hunted down a lot of rebels. Lost a lot of friends to the Vince, or the Fog Warriors, or the Talvashah. One day I woke up and couldn't think of a damned reason to keep doing my job. Turned myself into the re-educators.
You'd heard what the re-educators did to their prisoners.
Yes, I had. I wanted them to fix me like they fixed them. The Ben Hasrath ordered me to go to Orlais, ostensibly as a Talvashah, and work undercover. That's how I ended up here.
It sounds like you had a rough life under the Qun.
What, 3 meals a day and free sex whenever I need it? I came out here for the challenge, boss. Figured I'd rough it with you savages. Anyway, nice talking with you.
Magic exists to serve
What's going on?
man and never to rule over.
See you later, Bo.
See ya.
And corrupt are they who have taken his gifts and turned it against his children.
You travelled some distance to reach Haven. You're from the Circle in Oswick?
It was. It's exciting. Being away from that life, being somewhere new. Maybe that's selfish, given what's happened.
No, it's only fair, I suppose. We are grateful for your assistance.
Why would Templars break away from the Chantry?
The Order believes the Chantry no longer supports their efforts. Not to the extent they should.
But the Templars have served the Chantry for ages.
And in that time, they've come to take the Order's services for granted. Templars risk their lives against blood magic, demons, abominations, to feel as if those efforts are dismissed. I may disagree with the Order's actions. That I'm here is proof of that. But I sympathize with their frustrations.
Is there anything I should know?
Not at present.
I'd like to know more about the Templars.
What would you like to know?
Why did you join the Order?
I could think of no better calling than to protect those in need. I used to beg the Templars at our local chantry to teach me. At first, they merely humored me. I must have shown promise, or at least a willingness to learn. The Knight Captain spoke to my parents on my behalf. They agreed to send me for training. I was 13 when I left home.
13. That's still so young.
I wasn't the youngest there. Some children are promised to the Order at infancy. Still, I didn't take on full responsibilities until I was 18. The Order sees you trained and educated first.
What about your family? Did you miss them?
Of course. But there were many my age who felt the same. We learned to look out for one another.
Prior to the Conclave, I'd only encountered Templars in the Circle. Do they do anything besides guard mages?
Templars protect against the dangers of magic. Before the Order left the Chantry, that meant serving in a circle. They were also tasked with tracking apostates, or fighting demons inevitably summoned by the weak or malicious.
You've made it clear that you consider mages a threat.
Any mage can be. I won't pretend otherwise. I've seen the suffering magic can inflict. I've treated mages with distrust because of it, at times without cause. That was unworthy of me. I will try not to do so here. Not that I want mages moving through our base completely unchecked. We need safeguards in place to protect people, including mages, from possession at the least.
I know how I spent my time in the Circle, but what was a typical day for a Templar?
Typical. The last time I was in a circle was right before it fell apart. Nothing was typical.
Before that, then?
Certain rituals require a full guard. A mage's howling, for instance. I've attended a few. Most of the time, you merely maintain a presence, on patrol or in the circle, ready to respond if needed. Mages pretend to ignore that presence, but they're watching you just as closely.
We would spend all day with Templars, and yet they rarely spoke to us.
A habit often mistaken for coldness, I'm sure. But we are expected to keep a certain distance from our charges. If a mage is possessed or uses blood magic, you must act quickly, without hesitation. Your judgment cannot be clouded. Of course, ignoring one another does nothing to foster understanding.
What does Templar training involve?
There is weapon and combat training. Even without their abilities, Templars are among the best warriors in Thedas. Initiates must also memorize portions of the Chant of Light, study history, and improve their mental focus.
Did you enjoy your training?
I wanted to learn everything. If I was giving my life to this, I would be the best Templar I could.
You were a model student.
I wanted to be. I wasn't always successful. Watching a candle burn down while reciting the chant of transfiguration wasn't the most exciting task. And I admit, my mind sometimes wandered.
Do Templars take vows? I swear to the Maker to watch all the mages. That sort of thing?
There's a vigil first. You're meant to be at peace during that time, but your life is about to change. When it's over, you give yourself to a life of service. That's when you're given a filter, your first draft of lyrium and its power. As Templars, we are not to seek wealth or acknowledgement. Our lives belong to the Maker and the path we have chosen.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Another time, then. Did you need something?
I should get to know you better. We're working together, after all.
What would you like to know?
All right. Where are you from?
I grew up in Ferelden, near Honley. I was transferred to Kirkwall shortly after the Blight. This is the first I've returned in almost 10 years.
You haven't seen Ferelden in 10 years. Are you glad to be back?
I was not sorry to leave at the time, but I did not expect to return. Now, between the Divine's murder and the breach, I've arrived to find nothing but chaos.
You were in Ferelden during the Blight. Did you fight Darkspawn?
No. I was stationed at Ferelden's Circle Tower. The Circle had troubles of its own. I remained there during the Blight.
What happened at the Circle Tower?
You who survived the Blight have fond memories of that time. I would prefer not to speak of it.
What was Kirkwall like?
While I was there, Canary occupied and then attacked the city. The Viscount's murder caused political unrest. Relations between mages and Templars fell apart. An apostate blew up the Chantry, the Knight Commander went mad. Other than that, it was fine.
What happened between Kirkwall's mages and Templars?
You were at the Conclave. You must have heard people speak of it.
Yes, but you were there.
There was tension between mages and Templars long before I arrived. Eventually, it reached a breaking point. There was fighting in the streets. Abominations began killing both sides. It was a nightmare.
What happened then?
The Templars should have restored order, but Red Lyrium had driven Knight Commander Meredith mad. She threatened to kill Kirkwall's champion, turned on her own men. I'm not sure how far she would have gone. Too far.
So you opposed her?
I stood with the champion against her, in the end. I should have seen through Meredith sooner.
Varric's from Kirkwall. Did you two know each other?
I knew he was friends with the champion of Kirkwall, but little else. We've spoken more since I joined the Inquisition, largely at Varric's insistence. Apparently, I spend too much time with a serious expression on my face, and it's bad for my health.
I'll let you return to your work.
Another time, then. Yes?
What do you think of the people you work with?
Who do you mean?
Are you satisfied with the Inquisition's forces?
Our numbers are small, but they suit our needs for the time being. Some Templars have joined us instead of following the Order. They've proven invaluable in training new recruits.
I should let you get back to work.
Need something?
I want to know more about Red Lyrium.
I'll tell you what I can.
I think that's enough on Red Lyrium.
Yeah, not really my favorite subject. Need something?
Can I ask you something, Varric?
You want to talk about me? I'm flattered. Also inclined toward extravagant lies.
You from Ferelden? Orlais?
Free marches, born and raised in Kirkwall. And despite whatever you've heard, no, Kirkwall's not that bad.
I'm not clear on your line of work. You're a merchant?
I'm a businessman. My family has a seat in the Dwarven Merchants Guild. Merchants buy and sell goods. Businessmen buy and sell stores. In my spare time, I manage a spy network, and occasionally, I write books.
If you've run a spy network, why is Liliana our spy master?
To be honest with you, she's just a better spy master. The truly great ones can keep their distance. They don't get attached to their people. Me, I always wind up babysitting my informants and worrying about their families. We're in better hands with her.
You're an author? What kind of books have you written?
I've tried my hands at a few genres. My crime serials are my most popular. Hard in Hightown, guards breaking the rules to get things done. The Tale of the Champion is the most famous thing I've written, or infamous maybe. I started a romance serial once, Swords and Shields, but to be honest, I don't have a knack for romances. Most of my stories end in tragedy. Probably that says something unfortunate about me personally.
What sort of shops do you own?
Actually, we don't own shops. That was just an example. Mostly we invest in money lenders. Auction houses, a few mercenary companies, a couple of smithies. I think we own half a beet plantation in Ravane somewhere. Most of that's my brother's doing. Bartrand had business sense. Not much tact, but loads of business sense.
How do you and Cassandra know each other?
You heard about the Kirkwall Chantry being destroyed? The guy responsible used to be a friend of mine. The Seeker had questions about that, and I had answers.
Where did you get that crossbow? I've never seen one like it.
Bianca? She's one of a kind. Funny story. I bought a salvaged ship and found her locked in a dragonbone reinforced chest in the hold. I broke 36 lockpicks and blunted 9 saws opening that trunk, but it was worth it.
Who is she named for?
I can't tell you.
And the reason for that is...
Complicated. It's the one story I'll never tell. We just have to leave it at that.
Thanks, Varric.
No problem.
What can I do for you?
I'd like to know more about you, Solus.
Why?
You're an apostate, yet you risked your freedom to help the Inquisition.
Not the wisest course of action when framed that way.
I appreciate the work you're doing, Solus. I just wanted to know more about you.
I'm sorry. With so much fear in the air. What would you know of me?
What made you start studying the Fade?
I grew up in a village to the north. There was little to interest a young man, especially one gifted with magic. But as I slept, spirits of the Fade showed me glimpses of wonders I had never imagined. I treasured my dreams. Being awake, out of the Fade, became troublesome.
Did spirits try to tempt you?
No more than a brightly colored fruit is deliberately tempting you to eat it. I learned how to defend myself from more aggressive spirits, and how to interact safely with the rest. I learned how to control my dreams with full consciousness. There was so much I wanted to explore.
I gather you didn't spend your entire life dreaming.
No. Eventually, I was unable to find new areas in the Fade.
Why?
2 reasons. First, the Fade reflects the world around it. Unless I traveled, I would never find anything new. Second, the Fade reflects and is limited by our imaginations. To find interesting areas, one must be interesting.
Is this why you joined the Inquisition?
I joined the Inquisition because we were all in terrible danger. If our enemies destroy the world, I would have nowhere to lay my head while dreaming of the Fade. Ah, Inquisitor, that is why I joined, not why I stayed.
I wish you luck.
Thank you. In truth, I've enjoyed experiencing more of life to find more of the Fade.
How so?
You train your will to control magic and withstand possession. Your indomitable focus is an enjoyable side benefit. You have chosen a path with steps you do not dislike because it leads to a destination you enjoy. As have I.
You said you'd traveled to many different places.
This world, or its memory, is reflected in the Fade. Dream in ancient ruins, you may see a city lost to history. Some of my fondest memories were found in crumbling cities, long picked dry by treasure seekers, the best of the battlefields. Spirits press so tightly on the veil that you can slip across with but a thought.
Any place in particular?
I dreamt at Ostagar. I witnessed the brutality of the Darkspawn and the valor of the Ferelden warriors. I saw Alistair and the hero Ferelden light the signal fire, and Logain's infamous betrayal of Kaelin's forces.
I've heard the stories. It would be interesting to hear what it was really like.
That's just it. In the Fade, I see reflections created by spirits who react to the emotions of the warriors. One moment, I see heroic wardens lighting the fire, and a power-mad villain sneering as he lets King Kaelin fall. The next, I see an army overwhelmed and a veteran commander refusing to let more soldiers die in a lost cause.
And you can't tell which is real.
It is the Fade. They are all real.
Have you always traveled and studied alone?
Not at all. I have built many lasting friendships. Spirits of wisdom, possessed of ancient knowledge, happy to share what they had seen. Spirits of purpose helped me search. Even wisps, curious and playful, would point out treasures I might have missed.
I don't know of any spirits by those names.
They rarely seek this world.
When they do, their natures do not often survive exposure to the people they encounter. Wisdom and purpose are too easily twisted to pride and desire.
You're saying that you became friends with pride and desire demons?
They were not demons for me.
Meaning?
The Fade reflects the minds of the living. If you expect a spirit of wisdom to be a pride demon, it will adapt. And if your mind is free of corrupting influences, if you understand the nature of the spirit, they can be fast friends.
I'm impressed that you could become friends with spirits.
Anyone who can dream has the potential. Few ever try. My friends comforted me in grief and shared my joy. Yet, because they exist without form, as we understand it, the Chantry declares that spirits are not truly people. Is Cassandra defined by her cheekbones and not her faith? Varric by his chest hair and not his wit?
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I see your point.
Thank you. Few are willing to entertain such a notion.
We'll talk later.
Goodbye.
It occurs to me that you're a mage.
That just occurred to you?
I meant, you must have been part of the Circle of Magi in the south. Meaning, you were locked away like a criminal, at least until you rebelled. It's such a bizarre notion to me.
It's bizarre to me as well.
I believe this is a moment where we stand in mutual recognition of mankind's folly. It's more surprising that everyone would take the idea of a mage inquisitor so calmly. Maybe it's not calm. Maybe the Antivan crows are swimming in gold from all the contracts on your life. Good luck with that, by the way. Grand fun being the one in charge.
It occurs to me that I barely know anything about you.
Beyond my being a mage from Tevinter, you mean?
Beyond that, yes.
And beyond my being so charming and well-dressed, which is obvious to anyone.
You certainly think highly of yourself.
It's true. I could be more modest, but I'd be lying. Now, what was I talking about? Ah, yes, me. I am the scion of House Parvis, a product of generations of careful breeding and the repository of its hopes and dreams. Naturally, I despised it all. The lies, the scheming, the illusions of supremacy. That's Tevinter in a nutshell, isn't it? Needless to say, my family was not happy with my choices.
Why would your family be upset with your choices?
Because I rejected their idyllic plan. If they had their way, by now I'd be married to some unlucky girl from a powerful family. We'd live in luxurious despair, despising each other as I waited to take my father's place in the magisterium. I declined the honor, and thus it's best I'm far from home. Less of an embarrassment that way, you see?
I'm getting the impression you don't care much for your homeland.
On the contrary, I care for my homeland a great deal. There's so much potential. Sadly, we squander it. We refuse to acknowledge how far we've fallen because pretending is easier. We pretend the Qunari can be beaten. We pretend that we're superior to everyone, even our own people. Not everyone feels that way. I don't. Sadly, we're the minority.
It just seems so much of what you say about the Imperium is entirely negative.
It might sound that way. For all our faults, my people have many virtues. We are laden with history and culture. Tevinter is where Thedas truly began, remember? We treasure our past and preserve it. You can walk down a side street and find nothing built during the modern ages. And despite appearances, we care. Deeply. About everything. We have no reserve, not in war and not in love.
If I truly believed my homeland was beyond all hope, I wouldn't miss it so much.
What did you mean by generations of careful breeding?
The great families of Tevinter don't have children. They refine traits, weed out the undesirable, and promote the rest. My mother was chosen for my father because magic runs strongly in her blood. Never mind that they loathed each other. They wanted a son who could become Archon to make House Parvis the envy of the Imperium. They got me. A cautionary tale that you should be careful what you wish for.
Why remain with the Inquisition? Why not go back to Tevinter?
I'm not exactly welcome back home. Not that it matters. I'm quite accustomed to being a pariah. It adds to my charm. I can do more for Tevinter here. If the Venatori succeed, it'll set my homeland back 1,000 years. I'm sure some Magisters would disagree, but that's why we kill them.
I think I've heard enough.
That's too bad. I never tire of talking about myself.
I'd like to ask you about Tevinter.
Ah, yes. Everyone outside the Imperium always seems quite fascinated by it. Probably why they come up with so many ridiculous tales. Flying cows over Minrathous. That's madness. All right, that one's actually true, but the cows didn't have wings. I digress. Anything in particular you wanted to know?
It seems strange that an entire empire would be ruled by mages.
Strange? Why are you less qualified to rule than some tart with a fancy crown? Actually, the fiction in the Imperium is that mages don't rule. The Magisterium rules. That Magisters are all mages is considered a convenient technicality.
What is the Magisterium, exactly?
The upper house of the Imperial Senate, and the only part worth having a seat on. Those seats are split among the circles of Magi, the Chantry, and the major families. All mages now. It's odd that outside the Imperium, you use Magister like it applies to every Tevinter mage.
If you're not a Magister, then what do you call? No special title?
I'm an Altus, which is almost as good as a Magister, depending on who you ask.
I've never heard of an Altus.
Upper class. Those families who trace descent from the Dreamers, the first prophets of the old gods. If you're a mage and you're not Altus, then you're later, lower class. If you're not a mage at all, you're Soperati. That's everyone else. We do love our fancy words.
I thought the Archon ruled over the Imperium.
Well, yes. Technically, he can overrule laws passed by the Magisterium, but that never happens. Even so, he gets to appoint new Magisters, which means all the families vie madly for his favor. Thus, the Archon gets invited to all the parties. The truest path to Tevinter influence, let me tell you.
If it's a fiction, that means mages do rule, then.
Yes and no. Let me put it this way. Mages do rule, but not all mages are equal. If you're not from the right family, chances are you don't rule anything. Maybe you're even a slave. The idea that anyone could be a mage, however, keeps the masses placated.
Can anyone be a mage?
Technically. The potential runs mostly in bloodlines, but it's been known to happen. More importantly, commoners believe it can. Tevinter legend is chock full of mage heroes from humble origins. So they hold out hope. Someday my son or my son's son will be a mage. Someday. Poor sods don't realize that means he'll be a quaestor at the arse end of the 100 Pillars, at best.
Being a quaestor isn't a good thing?
I imagine the average non-mage likes to think so. Counting numbers and shuffling papers all day is better than many occupations after all. If you're a second-class citizen among a pack of piranha, however, your outlook changes.
But let me ask you something else.
Of course.
Anyone who talks about the Imperium mentions slavery. It's the center of the slave trade.
Ah, that is true.
And did you have slaves?
Not personally, but my family does and treats them well. Honestly, I never thought much about it until I came south. Back home, it's how it is. Slaves are everywhere. You don't question it. I'm not even certain many slaves do.
Well, we don't have slaves in the South.
In the south, you have alienages, slums, both human and elven. The desperate have no way out. Back home, a poor man can sell himself. As a slave, he could have a position of respect, comfort, and could even support a family. Some slaves are treated poorly, it's true. But do you honestly think inescapable poverty is better?
I suppose not, no.
I don't know what it's like to be a slave, true. I never thought about it until I saw how different it was here. But I suspect you don't know either. Nor should you believe that every tale of Tevinter excess is the norm.
Just how often is blood magic used there?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
That's what any Magister would tell you. They'd be convincingly offended by the notion, too. Of course, what people call blood magic here, and what we consider blood magic, are two different things.
What's considered actual blood magic in Tevinter?
Blood magic isn't inherently dangerous. Using your own blood or that of a willing participant, what's the harm? The problem is that what's permitted only gets you so much power. And what if you need more? You always need more. That's where we get into sacrifices and demon summoning. None of that is done. Not officially. Behind closed doors, it's a different story. Real blood magic can give you an edge, a leg up against your opponents. It's safe to assume that any mage of rank does it. The rest are quietly shut out of power, to put it bluntly.
You'd think the Templars would object.
I imagine they did, long ago. Once, their investigations might have been sincere. Then their balls were cut off. Too inconvenient. Nowadays, only the friendless are accused. And most of them probably innocent.
There must be some mages who oppose this.
Of course. I do. And I'm not entirely alone. Occasionally, there'll be a Magister who makes noise. And then the reform talk begins. All very patriotic. Meanwhile, that Magister will be quietly shunned. Chances are, surprise, it's learned he was a Maleficar all along. Most learn to keep quiet. Me? I enjoy the allure of pariahhood.
There's an Imperial Chantry, isn't there? With its own divine?
You people aren't supposed to talk about the Black Divine, are you? If you mention him outside the Imperium, people make that face, like you're urinating in public. But yes, we do have the Chantry, or a version of it. Night and day comparing it to yours.
Is the Imperial Chantry so different from ours?
Not in theory. The main difference is in the whole magic is meant to serve man, not rule over him business. Back home, ruling the unwashed masses is serving them, for the good of the Imperium. Perhaps it started with good intentions, but these days it's academic. The circles are in command.
There are circles of magi in the Imperium?
We don't have dismal little mage prisons, if that's what you mean. They're academies, prestigious ones. We have Templars as well, but they don't cancel spells or whatever your Templars do. They're soldiers.
They don't use lyrium?
Ha! As if there'd be any left for them. They watch for abuse of magic, yes, but only those who are weak or who fall out of favor get dealt with. Mostly they enforce the Magisterium's edicts. The Chantry smiles and nods from the sidelines.
Let me ask you something else.
So many questions.
I'm wondering if the Imperium would be a useful ally.
I'd think you'd be more concerned whether or not they'd support the Venatori. They won't. At least, not officially. They'll disavow all knowledge of dangerous cultists. Secretly, many Magisters will rejoice at the idea. And if the South falls to chaos in the meantime, all the better.
It would be in the Imperium's best interest to help. Surely it could use allies.
I think the Imperium gave up on the idea of allies a long time ago. We've been fighting the Qunari for what, 200 years off and on? It's a point of pride that we go it alone. They'll sneer at the South behind their silk handkerchiefs and say, "You've had it easy for far too long." Let's not forget that the Inquisition seems to be an arm of the Orlesian Chantry. Anathema so far as they're concerned.
We're not part of the Chantry. The Chantry opposed the Inquisition's formation.
You think that matters? Don't be silly. The Herald of Andraste. Your very title smacks of the Southern Chantry. You may as well be a heathen. I think they're far more frightened what you'll do if you succeed.
That's all I wanted to know.
Fair enough.
I should go.
As you wish.